Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Здравствуйте, товарищи. In this video, I would like to get a little bit more into details about life of the average people before and after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And for those who still wondering who the hell is that guy and why does he think that he knows everything about Soviet Union, well, my name is Sergei and I was born in the USSR. So we're back to the question from one of my viewers. Which ones do you think people have a better life when it was Soviet Union or now? I mean a better life for average people. For example, ease of finding a job, getting daily needs, etc. So today we're going to look at the part of ease of finding a job and getting daily needs. We'll look at those, how the people had those problems solved during the Soviet Union and after the collapse of USSR in 1991. And by the way, thank you so much to everyone who participated in the conversation in my previous video, Life After Collapse of the Soviet Union Part 1. There are like over 200 comments under that video, a lot of great suggestions, great ideas, some questions that kind of question my knowledge of situation. And I want to remind everyone, I'm not a professional economist. I just happened to live there. At that time, I didn't think that much about life in Soviet Union because I just lived there. But now looking back, I started to come up with different ideas, and that's what I would like to share with you. In my quest to compare apples to apples, I used examples of my grandmother and my mother to compare their lifestyles and their pensions during the Soviet Union and after. But of course, big picture situation was way more complicated. Some people had very, very good pension in the Soviet Union. For example, Comrade Nikita Khrushchev, after he was forcefully retired, he became a retiree of government, like state level, they call it, Союзного масштаба. And his pension was around 500 rubles per month. More than my family combined could earn in, or about in 2 months. His pension in 1 month was equal to family income of my parents in 2 months. Another category of people who had great pensions were coal miners. They were getting paid really well, around 500 rubles a month, and their pension was very high due to the condition of their work, but of course they didn't enjoy that pension for a long time because their health was quite poor after working in the coal mines all their life. Another group of people had really great retirement benefits were retired army officers, and of course as higher rank you had when you retire and as longer you served in the Soviet army, as better your pension was. So those guys had a great pensions too. And now back to the question. Let's talk about how easy it was to find a job during the Soviet Union and after, and how easy it was about getting your daily needs before and after. If we talk about jobs in the Soviet Union, we need to remember right away about the biggest achievement of the socialist system, about 0% unemployment. It sounds great, but you need to remember that it was illegal in the Soviet Union not to work without excuse. So you could get in trouble, and I'm talking up to going to jail, if you didn't work for up to 3 months. So you could be unemployed for up to 3 months. And after that, if you didn't have a valid excuse, like you're sick or you became handicapped or you have to take care of your sick relative, you could be called a parasite of society and could get arrested and sent to jail. And I believe it was like up to 3 years for the serious offenses. So of course, we always had 100% employment, since unemployment was illegal. The way I see it, for example, if you ask anybody how many drug dealers are officially working, doing their business in Chicago or New York City or LA, officially there's none, but probably there's plenty of them because it's illegal to be a drug dealer. Same way, if it's illegal to be unemployed, then you have 0% official unemployment. And of course, some shady characters, any country, any system had shady characters, would find a way to dodge the system, to dodge this unemployment rule. So for example, if you may be doing some illegal business and you have income that you can live on and you don't want to work, you can cut a deal with someone that puts you on the books like you're employed, and they will keep your salary, but they will keep you on the books so it looks like you're working, coming to work every day, and the boss, the manager of that company will be just pocketing the salary. So, if there is the will, there is the way. And I'm not an economist, but the idea of 100% employment sounds a little bit fishy, almost like impractical. You think about any system, you always need to have some margin of safety. You can't have the system be run like at 100% all the time. So same way, for example, if the Soviet economy was growing, but you have 100% employment, 0% unemployment. So if you build new factories, where are you going to find workers to fill the positions since everyone is already working? So that means you're going to rob other places of workers, which quite often happen when people from the villages, peasants, like their children will live in villages and join in the workforce in the cities to work at the factories and such. And then, of course, the agriculture was slowly dying out because there was less and less people to work the field. So I believe it was quite easy to find a job in Soviet Union, but was it easy to find a good job in the Soviet Union? That's a million-ruble question, because in the Soviet days, since government controlled the salaries, so the guy, if you're a manager of factory or a collective farm, you can't just make your mind decide, I want to pay the guys more because I want to attract better, qualified people. You couldn't do anything like that. So how would you attract the talent if you must pay exactly the same money as the factory across the street? At the same time, workers would consider jobs based on what kind of additional benefits they could get out of the job. And what I mean, what could you steal from the factory or whatever, from the store? Because pay was the same everywhere. But if you work, for example, like my father, he was a spray painter in Antonov airplane factory. So since he was using paint, he could steal paint or other chemicals that you used during painting, then you could sell it or trade it with other people. So a lot of times that was not about salary, it was about what kind of access to what kind of goods you're gonna get. So people who worked at the warehouses system, like shoe warehouses, food warehouses, all those places were golden mines because you had access to the goods, you had access to deficit. And then at the factories, people were stealing, and it was quite a bad issue for the government because they actually had like a struggle with so-called Nisuni. Nisun, it's like carrier. So you carry something out of the door for work, so you're Nisun. So there was the whole thing about battle against this situation when people steal stuff from the factories, from their places of work. There's an example for you. My brother's father-in-law, during the Soviet days, he was a top manager, so like he was director. So director, I guess you can call it, of a local distillery. So there was just a plant that processed wheat into pure alcohol, and then it was shipped out to the factories producing vodka. So he still, and we're talking now, has in his basement bottles and bottles of this pure alcohol from Soviet days that he slowly accumulated for all those 10 or 20 years while he was a director of distillery. So everyone was taking advantage if they could by stealing stuff, stealing goods at the places of work. Even in schools, ladies that work the cafeteria or the people who work at Stolovaya, at the factories when they fed their workers, everything was made from scratch. There was no Cisco semi-trailers bringing frozen goods that you just need to unpack and cook it. They had to bring potatoes, butter, everything in bulk, and then you just make stuff with it. So of course you could cut down on required amount of butter, of bread, meat, and people will sneak it out. So even children were robbed of their proper nutrition because people at the kitchen will quietly use less ingredients in order to take home meat, butter, sour cream, whatever. And now you think the situation changed. Now it's all about money. It used to be all about goods. Now in modern Russia, modern Ukraine, it's all about money. Because people, different companies, different stores pay different salaries. So now we're looking for highest bidder, highest pay you can get. And at the same time, during the Soviet days, retail was really like the best job you can get because of the access to goods. Now retail is the crappiest job because you can't steal it, it's private owned, so people watch you like hawks. At the same time, pay is not that great. So that's one of the reasons why in the Soviet Union, waiters, for example, if you work at some good restaurant, the waiters and waitresses, they were like jet set society. They had tons of money. And at the same time, we had a lot of jokes about poor engineers because officially engineers were making way more money than waitresses, but since they had access to the black caviar, to whatever other foods they could resell, they were really rich, making a lot of money. And engineers, if you work as an engineer, what can you steal? Especially if you work like in the designing something, all you have is just a paper and a pencil. So we had a lot of jokes about poor, broke engineers. Now we're talking about second part of the question about getting your daily needs. And here, of course, huge changes because we always had, as was the word of everyday life in Soviet Union, is deficit, shortage of items of consumer goods. So the worst case scenario, I mentioned it many times, you had to be in a waiting list for 9 years to purchase Zhiguli Lada car. Then other items like refrigerators and some other furniture, couches, waiting list could be 3 years, 2 years, 6 months. So getting your daily needs was pretty challenging business back in the Soviet days. Even groceries, we live in Kiev, capital of Ukraine, so we were on a number 2 level for supplying. I already mentioned several times that in Soviet Union it was quite different situation in the stores depending where you live. So like Moscow, since it was the capital of Soviet Union, they had priority, they were number 1 to supply in the country. So stores in Moscow were pretty much always packed full. I mean, variety wasn't that huge, and sometimes it's great. Like we had two kinds of salt. We had a coarse salt, and then we had really fine salt. I don't know how to call it. So you have like a rock salt, which is big chunks, and then you had those fine salt called extra. One type of sugar. We never had brown sugar. We never had powdered sugar, and so everything was one brand, one kind. But as I said, Moscow was supplied really well. Then maybe Leningrad was pretty close. Then you had the capitals of the Soviet republics. They were like next step down. So we were stuck pretty well. Like you don't have everything all the time, but we didn't really needed to struggle to find groceries. And then you go down the list, and like in the village when I spent every summer, they delivered bread to that store only 3 times a week. Otherwise, there was no bread, and people were waiting in line for like hour, 2 hours, waiting for the bread truck to arrive so they can buy some bread. And such huge difference in supply. Here in America, you go to Walmart somewhere by the big city, or you go to Walmart in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. You have exactly the same selection, same choices. Now you have Moscow that has different kind of sausages and meats and anything else, and then 200 kilometers east, there's some town that had empty stores. So this created a situation, I already mentioned about it, so-called sausage trains, where people would travel a day or 2 days by train to Moscow to do their grocery shopping. So for example, it could be a situation like there'd be meat processing plant in Saratov. I'm just kind of randomly picking the city. But all the produce, all their sausages and kolbasas will be shipped to Moscow. And then people from Saratov will take a train to go to Moscow to buy that kolbasa that they manufacture and take it back. So sausage trains were one of the way people were going grocery shopping, taking a train for a day or 2 day trip to load up on the sausages and other goods they couldn't buy at their home. And of course now we have supermarkets everywhere. The selection is out of this world. And honestly, like for me, going to supermarket in America is totally okay. I get used to it. You know, I got spoiled with all this selection and varieties. But then when I go to Ukraine, my brain still can't process. I cannot just accept the new reality, because I grew up at the times when you needed to hit like 5 stores in order to get your shopping list. I mean, we didn't really have shopping lists, but for example, when mom says, hey, we need bread, we need milk, we need sour cream, we need eggs, you can't find everything in one store. So you just check this store, okay, they still have bread, get some bread. Then you walk for 2 kilometers, hey, but they still have eggs, I got some eggs. So you have to hit quite a bit of stores to get all your needs, all your groceries. And I said, now you go in the supermarket and this whole selection that they offer, I'm just going nuts. As like, where did you hide all this stuff during the Soviet days? Because I remember every collective farm was working like crazy. We had all the fields were planted with wheat and beets and potatoes. You know, there was so much activity going on. Now you go out in the country, you watch my modern Ukraine videos, and it's like dead. Villages are dying out. Most collective farms are closed. Buildings collapsed. But at the same time, there's so much foodstuffs, bunch of different varieties, all kind of things you can only imagine for sale at every supermarket on every corner. And people used to run, as I said, between stores to snatch eggs or to snatch some fish. But the easy thing was prices were the same everywhere. Now, like my father, he goes to different supermarkets, but not because of selection, not because he needed eggs and one supermarket had eggs and one didn't, but because something is cheaper in this supermarket. You know, they have maybe promotion or whatever, sale. So he'll go specifically to save $1 here. Then he goes to a different store, buy bread there because it's a little bit cheaper there. So he still runs around visiting maybe 3-4 supermarkets, but not because of the shortage of goods, but because of shortage of money, and that he can save, 6 hryvnias here, 5 hryvnias there. For me, it would be like not worth the time. But with, if your pension $70 a month or $100 a month, 50 cents dollar, that's a lot of money to save. So wrapping up the question, when did people have a better life? It's kind of the same, but flipped upside down. In Soviet Union, we had some money, not much, but we hardly had any goods to buy. Now there's more than enough goods to buy, but people have no money or not enough money to buy what they need. So it kind of flip-flopped. Now it's more goods, less money. Before there was more money, less goods. So I personally prefer to have a better selection and maybe less money. I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, I appreciate your comments, your likes. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. It's Ushanka Show. And we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. Hey, by the way, cool merch for cool comrades is available at the Ushanka store at teespring.com. And if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet